everybody, and welcome to the No Name Musicast. First things first, I would like to welcome all our friends from the Radio Freak Jam, a group of companies who've been listening in. So welcome, everyone. And if you're not familiar with Radio Freak Jam, go to freakjam.co.uk. It's an online open mic night. It's kept the whole West London music community together. So I just want to give those fine people a quick shout out at the very beginning. But here I am. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And I have the topic this week, but I've sent Joy shopping. So as many people know, I like to go to thrift shops and I like to buy music. And I used to buy vinyl until it completely dried up. So I buy a lot of CDs. So I've challenged Joy to go to the thrift shop to buy 3 CDs. And what I'm going to do is Joy is going to reveal one at a time each of those CDs. But she's going to tell me why she spent her hard-earned cash out on that CD out of the literally dozens of junky CDs available in the thrift shop.
Okay.
So first off, Joy, how was your thrift shopping CD experience?
Well, you have to be very careful because it will look like it is one CD and you open it and it is the Windows 1998 actual computer program, I found out. So you have to watch very carefully that you're actually buying what you think you're buying. And in a second, you'll find out I did get tricked.
Yes, because some thrift shops you go to, they check them and they seal them. But some thrift shops, they just throw them all together, and you're quite right. And it's like, I'm going to get me some Metallica. And you open it up, and it's like, oh, AOL software installation disk.
Yeah, and you could tell that they weren't really taking the time to see what was actual CDs, because even in the CD section, you can see Windows 1998. So I think they kind of just mixed them all together. But I got tricked. One CD said it was one thing, and then the inside's a completely different thing.
Fantastic. Well, I will tell you that I've also went CD shopping as well, but I go CD shopping all the time. But I've got 3 CDs from my recent thrift shopping haul. But we're going to start with Joy first. So,
okay.
With this, I'm incredibly excited about this because something I do all the time. So sending you off on a shopping mission was quite a thing I was looking forward to. So you're going to reveal your first CD from your thrift shopping. What do you have?
Okay, so my first one has 2 CDs in one. It is Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Love. So if you know this is I'm pretty sure in the original album it was probably an A-B situation. Has 2 things in it. A cool thing about this CD is it's got a lot of really good songs that most people know from. I mean, Sir Duke is on here, things of that nature, which is awesome. But I recently learned that this came out in 1975. It is on Motown. I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, I think this, or 1976. This was his first album on Motown. And he actually said he was going to quit music and go help handicapped children.
Oh, wow.
In Africa or something. And he was all packed his bags and ready to go. Randomly decided to change his mind. Don't know why. I'm sure there's probably an interview out there we could find out. And then he decided to sign on with Motown, and this was the album he released. And if you know anything about me, Motown is probably my favorite genre of music overall. I absolutely love that kind of mix of soul, kind of rock and roll, really fun genre music. But this one has like I Wish, Sir Duke, Isn't She Lovely, a lot of his really great hits. And so as soon as I seen this, I was very excited.
Fantastic. Well, I've had that album on CD before because I used to have a huge CD collection in the early 2000s. And then I foolishly sold it all off to buy a Gibson Les Paul guitar, which I no longer own. And in fact, I should tell you, I bought a Gibson Les Paul guitar with the proceeds of selling my multi-thousand CD collection that I owned for around a year, and I did a weekend of gigs with it, and it was so heavy, it made my back problems flare up, and then I had to sell it. So not only did I not have a super cool flame-top Gibson Les Paul guitar, I also didn't have my CD collection anymore. So
there's that. Tim, that's a rough time.
It'd be incredibly rough. And one of those CDs that got sold off was Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life.
Great CD, great album. So the next one is the one that tricked me, but Tim will appreciate this. This was supposed to be Shania Twain's Come On Over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I saw they had them all kind of lined up. You could see the sides. So I pulled it out, not paying attention. It's actually the Nutty Professor soundtrack. So I ended up with the Nutty Professor soundtrack. So then I opened it to see, well, maybe the CD inside. Nope, it's the Nutty Professor soundtrack, which I can't tell you what is on the Nutty Professor soundtrack. I picked this because, first of all, Shania Twain is amazing, but also because it was produced by John Mutt Lang. Me and Tim had talked about him recently because I found out he provides a lot of her backup tracks on some of her music that kind of not Conway Twitty. What is that? Dwight Yoakam sound is him. And I didn't know he had a nickname, and Tim told me it's Mutt. And on the back of the album, it does say Mutt in parentheses.
John Robert Mutt Lang. He's famous. I mean, he's famous, of course, for producing Shania Twain and being married to Shania Twain. But he also is very famous for AC/DC's Back in Black. And also, he's famous for Def Leppard. Now, any of the classic, like Def Leppard hysteria that you hear is all produced by Mutt Lang. And in fact, when you hear those beautiful multi-stacked harmonies on Def Leppard records, it's like one Joe Elliott and 30 Mutt Langs.
Yeah, I heard he kind of had that layer of music you hear with the wall of sound. He kind of took that and put it into like a rock music kind of country thing. He's credited with making that kind of cool sound. But I knew who he was, kind of, and I knew he was married to Shania, but I had no idea he was the one doing the backup vocals and a few of her songs. And of course, this one starts out with "Man, I Feel Like a Woman," and then like "You're Still the One." So it's a classic. What does the Nutty Professor have on it? Let's see. I don't know.
I own that album on CD, the Shania Twain one, but I'm very interested to know what's on the Nutty Professor. I'm sure the inlay card is going to reveal all.
So it says, "Touch Me, Tease Me" by Case featuring Foxy Brown. "I Like" by Montel Jordan. "My Crew Can't Go for That." I'm not even going to try to say that. It'll sound incredibly white, whoever's singing that one. "Ain't Nobody," Naughty by Nature with Monica. I do know that song. "Pillow," Richie Rich. I thought that was a guy from a movie featuring Dwayne Wiggins. I really don't know any of this. "Last Night," performed by As Yet. "Come Around," performed by DOS of Soul. And the O has like a little tilde type thing over it, so I'm guessing they're not an English band. I can't even say this seriously. "We Want Yo Hands Up," not your hands, Yo Hands Up. Wayne G featuring something I can't say. "Ain't No G Thing," which is Jay-Z. It came back around. We had a whole discussion about Jay-Z last time, featuring Foxy Brown. "Breaker 1, Breaker 2," some Def Jam something. "Do It Again" by LL Cool J. "Nasty Immigrants" by 12 O'Clock featuring some name I can't say. Something called "Love You Down" by Da Basement. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to tell you guys the truth. This is not my forte.
Well, the thing is I like, so when you go into a thrift shop and you see all of those CDs, it's not like a CD shop. You go into a thrift shop, everything in there was owned by someone. In the context, everything was owned in there, but in the context of the CDs, everything in there was owned by someone. So someone along the line, someone in this local area at the time couldn't wait to buy the Nutty Professor soundtrack. That was their Queen's Night of the Opera. That was their, I don't know, Billy Joel, blah, 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 or Van Halen's 1984 album. There's someone around here saw that Nutty Professor album and they were like, yes, I am going to get that. That's going to be the best thing ever. I literally can't wait. And they went to FYE or Target or wherever they got it from. And they were driving back in their car and they were excited that they had the Nutty Professor soundtrack. And then they got it home and they put it on and they were like, yeah, these jams, this is the best thing I've ever heard.
It's amazing. And I got a 2-for-1 on that one, so I'm pretty happy. With that being said, I really don't come for me trying to pronounce these people's names. I don't know. I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting to come back with it is on Def Jam Records, so, one of the most iconic record producers of all time. So
So just a question for you on the subject of the Nutty Professor. I've never seen it. Have you seen the Nutty Professor?
Ages ago, like when I was younger. I know what it's about. Like I mean, but I wouldn't be able to tell you any trivia of it. I know there's like beakers and he does something and he ends up larger than he was. That's all I remember.
And when you saw it, you know, like I'm sure, like when you saw the Elton John movie or Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody film, or even like Saturday Night Fever, all movies that have strong soundtracks. When you saw the Nutty Professor, did you come away from that thinking, yes, the music in that was iconic?
Absolutely not. Of course. It came out in 1996, so I was only 6 years old. So maybe it didn't register with me at the time. But I could not repeat. And I am a person who does not care for movies. I prefer music, and most of the movies I like them because of the soundtracks. And I can say the Nutty Professor did not. I feel like, it wasn't, there was nothing centered around the music. And so I don't know why I failed to speak there for a second, but so it seems like a lot of the music, it was just kind of background. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be able to really associate any of the movie with this. I just remember basically he was a professor and he does something and he ends up getting like really big. That's all I remember.
And hilarity ensues.
Yeah, it's a very almost Mrs. Doubtfire. Have you seen Mrs. Doubtfire, Tim?
Yeah.
It's kind of that humor.
Yeah, 100 years ago. It's the thing you that was probably on TV at Christmas once that I didn't really pay any attention to.
And since I kind of got gypped on the Nutty Professor, I came with 4 instead of 3. So that's why there's 2 more in my hand.
Okay, so well let's move on to the iconic CD number 3.
So I picked Bonnie Raitt's Nick of Time, and I absolutely adore Bonnie Raitt. She is one of the most underrated female artists, writes amazing music, just an all-around good person. The reason I picked this was she has struggled a lot when she first started music, and this was her first one that won her like 3 Grammys, was album of the year, that kind of thing. And if you've ever heard the intro to Nick of Time, it's got that cool kind of guitar riff at the beginning, and of course that's the headlining song. I don't know that this is one that a lot of people would know some of the songs on it, but it's got Nick of Time, Thing Called Love, Love Letter, Cry on My Shoulder, things like that. So a lot of it, I don't think she writes all of her own music. I just know she's a good musician as far as like a guitar player and things of that nature. But that's why I picked this one, because she's an iconic female that I don't think gets enough praise, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I love Bonnie Raitt, and I've been collecting a lot of her albums from thrift shops. And I've got most of the ones that are post Nick of Time. I think I've got one or maybe one prior to Nick of Time. But Nick of Time is, like you say, was the turning point for her career. She is such an iconic slide guitar player. She's one of the world's greatest slide guitar players. There's like Ry Cooder and her in that kind of blues type genre.
Also, her voice is amazing.
Oh.
Like the sound of her voice, like it's something that people should. If you don't listen to Bonnie Raitt, go give her the time of day. She is fantastic.
One thing I would say about that album as well, there's certain CDs that come up in thrift shops continually. Bonnie Raitt's Nick of Time, I think you could go into any Goodwill or thrift shop in the entire country and probably pick up at least one Bonnie Raitt album, if not that one.
Well, I think probably this was, because like we said, this was kind of when it was in 89, so it's kind of when she trajected into like stardom. So this probably, and she won Album of the Year that year, so it probably is her best-selling album, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. But so I ended up with that. And then the last one, is Backstreet Boys Millennium. This is their second, which has a nice stain on it that I don't know what that's from. So whoever was really excited about this dropped their food on it. Anyway, so if you know me, I grew up in the 90s. I'm a huge Backstreet Boys fan. This was their second album. It was released in America and in the United States at the same time. Platinum. I mean, you've got Larger Than Life. I Want It That Way. Show Me the Meaning of Being Lonely. And when I'm saying these, I know you can hear all of it in your head, whether you like them or not. So that was my final choice.
So the question with the Backstreet Boys album, when you was a fan, did you actually originally own that?
Oh, 110%. And I had the little, I don't know if you even know what these are. They're called like mini clip players. You know what they are, Tim? Okay, yes. In the 90s, I even had a mini clip version of this.
Because I saw there's a YouTube channel I follow that follows retro technology, and he did a whole thing on mini clips.
Yeah, they're kind of the silliest thing ever. But I think I had one that had like a picture close, because it wasn't the exact album, I don't think, but it had like larger than life on it and stuff like that. And, you know, you only get to hear like 30 seconds of it. So in essence, it's a really silly concept. But that was my final choice. And Tim knows I went and saw the Backstreet Boys pre-COVID recently, and it was my favorite concert I've ever seen. But then I was slightly disappointed to find out how ingenuine, I don't know that word. It was not. So what I did was when I got home, I did what I think some people have done and try to Google the concert I went to. So I Googled the concert that I went to, hoping I could find a live video of it. Because I'm one of those people, I don't want to like stare at through my phone the entire time I try to experience the concert, even though I do end up recording a bunch. And so I found this was their last tour. I think it was DNA. No, yeah, maybe. Don't quote me on that. But the one that they were saying was going to be pretty much their farewell tour. This was pretty much their farewell tour. So when I went to see them, it was fantastic. Everything was on point. The sound was great. But then when I started YouTubing, I found out it's almost like a Broadway show. It's scripted. Every joke, every statement, everything they made, down to their grand finale, they do a standing ovation, and then you're like chanting for them to come back on stage, and they come back on stage. Well, the newest Backstreet Boys album that they came out with a few years back that had 2 or 3 hits that were pretty popular there, that's what they come back and do it for their when they come back on stage. And they put on, this was in a what are those sports things, Tim? I don't know sports. The arena?
I believe they call them an arena, yes.
So it was an arena tour. But usually there's some type of sports team that's associated with that arena. So when they came back on stage, they were wearing the jerseys of that sports team. And this was in North Carolina, Charlotte, whatever sports team was associated with that, I can't tell you. And so, you know, there's like, oh, that's cool. They're making it personal. But then when you watched it, every arena they went to, they did the exact same thing. There was a joke at one point about one of their moms, not a bad joke, like just talking about their mom. There was a story Howie told, and like it was the exact same story. But it showed to me, and then what's interesting about that though is they were kind of the first one of almost like Forced to Be Together commercialized. Like they put them all in that hotel in Florida, and then that guy who's in jail now took all their money, kind of made them be together. And I know they do that with the K-pop people now, where it's almost like a boy band manufacturing machine in a way. Sure. And so that makes sense why it's almost scripted.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the scripted. I mean, you think from a production perspective, you have this arena tour. You have lighting, you have the sound, you have the backdrops, you have the costumes, you have all that stuff that goes into it. So it makes sense in some degree why it would be scripted. Like if you go and see a rock band play, I mean, invariably if you see a band on a big tour, they're going to play much the same set list every time. But outside of sort of lighting and maybe what they would do on the soundboard, you can mix it up a little bit. I mean, if they want to drop a song or add a song, it's not such a big deal. But on something like that, that is a production that probably has backing dancers and lighting crews and lasers and smoke and fire bombs and all the stuff, the trappings of There's a lot of electric
lights that are like probably if you were... I think there was even a thing warning if lights have an effect on you to not come to this concert, because there was a lot of like lights shooting into the audience. So, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of light production. And, I mean, that does make sense, and I understand it. But at the same time, it did kind of, like, take me back a step. But that's why it was so perfect. You know what I mean? It was structured to be that way.
Sure. I mean, but sometimes certainly when you see rock bands, like I said before, you get different, almost the same but different stuff every time. The take on it's going to be different. But in a big production show like that, you can see it. I mean, like I was very disappointed that I never saw Katy Perry on her last tour. And I've seen the video of it, and it is like Cirque du Soleil. It's a whole theater production.
Yeah, and I've seen some of Katy Perry's, like even down to the costumes, especially like when she was doing like the candy outfits, and then I saw her wearing like this thing that was like a bear, and she does a lot of like covers from other artists sometimes, and she was doing Whitney Houston's, oh, what song was it? I Want to Dance with Somebody.
Oh, okay.
That's what she was doing. And she did it every time, kind of the same. And you even watched her kind of walk down stage in the same. So I understand it's blocking, but it's interesting to me from someone coming from a theater perspective that it's almost being put on like a theater show.
Yeah.
Down to the blocking and the stage right, stage left. But I guess if you've got somebody who's constantly having to do all your sound, constantly having to do all your lighting, for them, it's probably much easier than having to rethink that every time.
Sure, absolutely.
So that was one of my choices, Tim. What did you think?
Well, I think you got the full thrift shop experience because you got a Bonnie Raitt album because they all have them. And I'm sure when you was going shopping, you also saw REM's, well, at least one REM album.
Yes.
And you probably saw, I can't even think of her name.
There was a ton of Barbra Streisand.
Yeah, Joan Osborne's Relish. Did you see a copy of that while you was there?
I can't remember it specifically.
I think under Virginia state law, each thrift shop has to have at least one copy of that.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. Whoever donated their albums really had a thing for Barbra Streisand and Neil Sedaka when I was there.
Well, there you go. And again, you have to think to yourself at some point that someone was very excited to own that particular album.
So thinking of that, talking about being really excited about albums, I used to, when I was younger, if we went to a store at all, the only thing I'd ever want my parents to buy me was a CD. I wanted to get a CD. I remember opening the plastic, ripping it open. There was something, and I went through a strange time period. And this is why this is strange now is because while I still like this band, I don't know why I was obsessed with getting every single one of their albums. The first artist that I wanted to get every single one of their albums was AC/DC. Mm-hmm. Don't know why. I like AC/DC, but they're not like the top of my. But at one point in time in my life, I was dedicated. I had every album. One of my favorite albums to get, and if you've never listened to it, listen to the Aqua album that has Barbie girls. Aquarium. I guess that's how you say that. Yeah, I was gonna say that wrong, but I think that's right. And if you've never heard some of their other music, fantastic. Happy Boys and Happy Girls, fantastic. And another artist that people probably have no clue about, that they probably, actually two, that I was obsessed with getting their albums was Baha Men, yes, Who Let the Dogs Out. But they have a whole subset of music that was on that album that was fantastic. And it was a self-titled album. I think it was just Who Let the Dogs Out was the name of the album. And then Lou Bega, who did Mambo No. 5, he has fantastic albums. And if you never listened to Tricky Tricky by Lou Bega, go do it.
Well, you're saying about Lou Bega. I remember Mambo No. 5 coming out, and I have a very particular memory of going up to see a friend of mine who was at Durham University in Durham in England. And I went up to visit him, and I stayed with him for a few days. I never went to university, but I got the university experience by staying with him for a few days one weekend. And there was this particular nightclub that they always used to go to. I think it was called Clute, if I remember correctly. It may not be its real name, but that's what they called it. And I remember going up there, waiting to get in the freezing cold in the north of England, and Mambo No. 5 was blasting out of this nightclub. And whenever I hear it, it takes me right back. It's almost as if I was still there.
That's fantastic. So I'm not going to do it, but I do know every word to Mambo No. 5. But weird fact, and if anyone remembers this, Disney Channel produced a version of Mambo No. 5 with Mickey and Minnie singing it.
Oh, dear.
And it named different Disney characters. And for some reason, I always think of that. And they're like, because in the Mambo No. 5 video, he's like wearing like a fedora, and it's like, that 1920s almost smooth criminal Michael Jackson kind of look. And he's like dancing, and there's girls dancing around him and stuff. And, he's like, I got this person and this person. So then it's like Mickey doing that. And it's like, and here's Donald, here's Daisy. And it was the weirdest thing because the song Mambo No. 5 really isn't appropriate for children to begin with, but then they tried to make it fun for kids, and it's just really weird. If you've never heard it, I suggest you Google Disney version of Mambo No. 5.
I think as soon as this record is finished, I'm going to get the Google machine, and I didn't even know that existed.
I remember it when it was out. It's kind of like the Macarena, how there's like a third, like for like 2 years of our life, everybody was doing the Macarena. I'm sure Disney did a version of the Macarena.
Have you ever heard the Christmas Macarena?
No.
There's a Christmas mix of it. It's called Macarena Christmas Mix, Joy to the World. And it starts off with the regular Macarena bit, and then it goes through Christmas, like a medley of Christmas carols, and then it goes back to the Macarena, and then it goes through some more Christmas carols.
Does it work?
It works in the context of a novelty hit.
Oh, okay.
I don't kick back and think, shall I put on some Led Zeppelin? Shall I put some Queen on? Or shall I put on the Macarena Christmas remix?
Well, like sometimes you can take songs and layer them and it shouldn't work, but it works. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was like, does it work? Because that would be really interesting if it did. No, well, now, Tim, I'm going to have to go Google that because I've never heard that before. Not once. And then, but true fact, the first two CDs, so I think it was 1990, probably 94, 95, 96, something like that. I would have been first grade, second grade. All I wanted for Christmas was a CD player, like my own personal CD player. Mm-hmm. And then, so my parents got it for us. I'm a twin. So both me and my twin sister a lot of times got the same thing because, they didn't want us to fight over it. So we each got that little anti-skip CD player that everybody had that was not anti-skip. Mm-hmm. You can see it. It's the gray one, silver, whatever you want to call it. So we had that. And the two first albums I owned were, I can't even say this seriously, Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yes.
Did an album with One Way or Another. I don't even know what the name of it was, but it was her album. And then it was Selena, which I recently learned Tim did not know about Selena.
No, I'd never heard of Selena. It was, as everybody knows, 80s music culture is very much my thing. And I sort of checked out in about 1988, 89. However, I lived during the 90s. I may not have had a knowledge of music and culture. I wasn't that into it, but if there was a name around, maybe I would have heard of that name. I'd never heard of her.
Well, I think part of it is partially because she was Mexican-American. She grew up in America. She didn't even speak Spanish. Her family did. They tried to teach her to speak Spanish with the whole thing. And she learned Spanish, and she was going on and doing all these concert tours. And she was one of the first ones to bring, I can't even say it. It's like Tijano. It's like this kind of genre of Mexican Spanish kind of music. And so she was, but her career was so short-lived because she got killed. So that's the thing that I find interesting is that you didn't hear about her dying. So she was killed by the president of her own fan club.
Yeah. So, I just think that if that was a thing, I would have heard that.
Well, so what's interesting about it is this lady, and I can't remember her name, and I don't care because she's evil, and so I don't want to remember her name. She was kind of like stealing money, and things were getting Selena was like running some stores for fashion because she was trying to do her own fashion line, and she was getting money funneled in through her fan club. And this was back in the day when people actually paid memberships for fan clubs and stuff. And somehow she picked up on things were going missing. And rather than disappoint her favorite artist, the leader of her fan club killed her instead.
That's terrible.
Yeah. And she was she was on trajectory to be one of the most popular female artists of the 90s, but it was cut so short because of what happened. And so one of her last famous concerts, and there was a whole movie called the Selena movie. Mm-hmm. So you can watch like the whole scenario play out in the movie. And her family actually helped write the movie. So it is pretty accurate. Jennifer Lopez plays her in the movie. So, And J-Lo does a pretty good job. I'm going to give it to her. I think J-Lo even sings the music. I don't think it's Selena's version. I think it's J-Lo's version. She does really, really good. But then she kind of did some crossover songs because she was really into like Diana Ross and disco and really wanted to kind of step into that world. but her dad kind of wanted her to stay with her roots, and her family played as her band. Her sister was her drummer, her brother was her guitarist, I think her other brother was her bassist, and so that's how they came to be. Her dad basically kind of tried to grow them up as like the Jackson 5 or something.
No, I'd never heard of them. But equally, had you ever heard of a UK pop act called Five Star?
Only when you said it once before, but I don't remember what you even said.
Yeah, so I wonder sometimes they target these pops because, to some degree, all music that you hear has been sculpted by A&R people and marketing people. There are some acts that organically appear, but even bands that claim to be not commercial, they are commercial because they're on a label. So I wonder whether her look and the music that she done and her heritage, etc., was steered to the US market, whereas something like Five Star, their look and their heritage and what have you, was steered to the UK market.
110%. And I recently learned about, and I don't remember what the band was, or I was watching a documentary about some, I guess, is it Ireland or Scotland that had like the kind of wars between each other or something?
Yes, Scotland and England.
Okay. So there was like a band that like was killed in a bombing from the 70s, and I had never heard of them, and it was complete like seems like something I would have known. Sorry,
it's not the I thought you was thinking much long before. No, there was a lot of troubles in the 80s with the IRA and stuff like that.
That's what it was. IRA. There was a band that was killed. Members of it were killed or something, and they only had like one major hit, and then they just kind of like disappeared after that. And I was like, how have I never heard of this? But like you're saying, it probably wasn't really targeted to me until I happened to find some Netflix documentary about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that either, to be honest with you.
I couldn't tell you who the band was, but it was an interesting documentary to learn about. It was on Netflix, I'm pretty sure. I'll probably think of like the name of it as soon as we end this podcast, because that's exactly what happens. But yeah, it just shocked me. But it was just so interesting because most of the time when me and Tim talk about music, with the exception of Tim brings up a few things from the UK I'm not familiar with, I usually generally know. And I think a lot of famous UK artists try to transcend into the American market at some point. So I have a little bit of an advantage there. But when I said that about Selena and it was like deer in the headlights, I was like, oh, I just assumed.
Yeah, no, honestly, I'd never heard of them.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. Well, Tim, what were the last CDs you found at the thrift shop?
Okay, so I also full disclosure, I always go thrift shopping because I like buying CDs in the thrift shop, because my justification is I had this great collection and then I sold it, and I should have never done that. But then, as Hannah pointed out, if I'd have kept it and then I moved here, I wouldn't have been able to bring it with me. So anyway.
So I was coming in with the logical. She's so logical.
Exactly. And also, I'm paying tribute to my early self who used to buy CDs from Our Price Records in Hounslow High Street. I know exactly where that is, Joy. And
110%. Can go there right now.
Near WX Smith, you know where that is. And I used to pay £15 for a CD. So the fact that I can go into a thrift shop and buy them for $1 or less, it's very exciting. I know you can get them on the internet for nothing, but that's beside the point. But I've got my CD collection, and no one's taking that away now. So anyway, I always go see. I
tell you guys in the last podcast, when I said 1993, that was at a little bit of exaggeration. That Tim made it to 1993. It's more like 1989.
There you go.
Shut it all off.
So I went thrift shopping last week, and the week before that, and the week before that, and the week before that. So I've compiled 3 CDs, which I've yet to listen to. Some of them are still sealed up by one of the thrift shops I go to, which is a good representation of what I buy when I go shopping in thrift shops. Okay. So your first CD, which I bought, is a classic, of course, as they all are. And this one is Buddy Holly.
Oh, that's a fantastic choice.
And it's entitled For the First Time Anywhere. Now, I would assume prior to 1983, when the CD came out, you was able to get Buddy Holly music. But this CD is entitled For the First Time Anywhere.
And you guys can't see it, but I can. That picture is it's something else on the front of the CD there.
Yeah, he doesn't have his glasses on, which is his classic Buddy Holly look.
Yeah, and he looks very tan, almost orange.
Yeah, I think that's probably the pitch has been doctored to look like that.
Yeah. But
one thing about Buddy Holly is my dad loves Buddy Holly. So this is a something that I like. I mean, there's good music on here, and maybe Baby and stuff and other such hits. But the fact that it reminds me of my youth when stuff like this was being played often.
Makes sense.
Did you ever see the Buddy Holly film with Gary Busey?
Yes, I have more than once actually.
So,
that's a good choice.
Yeah, it's remarkably a good film actually.
Yes. Of course, now when I think of Buddy Holly, though, I have a hard time. I think of the Weezer song Buddy Holly a lot. And so I have to put that out of my brain and be like, no, that's not, no. Focus.
Well, the best thing about the Weezer Buddy Holly song is the video.
Yeah. Classic Weezer.
When they're in the Happy Days diner.
Yes. And that works perfectly, though. Because, when did Buddy Holly die? Like 59, 60, something like that?
Something like that. I know he was only in his 20s, like early 20s.
I think it was 1959. All I ever think about whenever I think of Buddy Holly is I always end up singing That'll Be the Day.
I don't know if that's on here. It's got Brown-Eyed Handsome Man and Maybe Baby and a few others.
He started his career by opening for Elvis. I know that.
Do you know, I didn't even know that.
Well, I found a fact Tim didn't know. Everyone put that down to put a check.
Yeah, if you have your No Name Music House scorecard, that's
somebody will Google it and tell me that's wrong. I'll hear how that's wrong.
Okay, so that was CD number 1 from my thrifting collection. CD number 2, I paid a premium for. One of my thrift shops sometimes marks stuff up, but they're a good thrift shop and they help people locally. So I'm not too fussed about the fact it was $4, not $1. But anyway, I present to you, this is the ultimate collection. This isn't any collection of this music. This is the ultimate collection. It's Jimmy Buffett's Meet Me in Margaritaville.
I love Jimmy Buffett.
It must be said, I know Jimmy Buffett more for his theme restaurants than I do for his music.
My best friend is obsessed with Jimmy Buffett, and her spouse go to a lot of his concerts, and she even has a license plate that says Fins Up.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So he's just a cheeseburger in paradise. What can we say?
Exactly, with a pickle and a slice or whatever the lyrics are.
You can hear Cheeseburger in Paradise and not sing it like there's something wrong with you. I'm just saying. Song's iconic.
There was a time I was in Vegas in the Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville cafe that's there on the Strip. And I think it was the first time in Vegas. And we was in the restaurant eating. And I'd ordered the Cheeseburger in Paradise, which is a menu item at Margaritaville. And being Vegas, we were sitting there and I looked up and there was a Elvis impersonator in full regalia, the full white Elvis Vegas suit. And he got up from his table, looked incredibly grumpy, incredibly disgruntled, and he stormed out.
It was the real Elvis. That's why. Didn't you figure this out? That's why. Elvis is so tired at this point. Lord. Well, Tim, I thought for a second you were going to say you looked up and there was Jimmy Buffett, but it was better when I heard it was a disgruntled Elvis impersonator.
But it's funny, before moving here, I hadn't really heard of Jimmy Buffett because a friend of mine gave me a Jimmy Buffett album and I was not aware of it at all. I think he probably has fans in England, but he's not really a household name like he is here.
Yeah, And I mean, he's famous, but I don't know that he's like one of the largest, artists in general. So I could see why maybe he has it transcend. And he's got that kind of beach music vibe that there's a lot of Americans that are really into.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about beach music the other day.
We were indeed. But yeah, so I'm excited to listen to this. This has got everything: Margaritaville and Fins, and the changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes. I'm old classic Volcano. I can't wait.
That's amazing. Good choice.
Anything that purports to be the ultimate collection that will only have the very best of Jimmy Buffett, of course.
Oh, well, we only need the best, really.
Exactly. And for my $4 that I spent in the thrift shop, I expect nothing but the best.
There better not be one scratch on that CD.
Well, no, the shop I go to checks them and then seals them. So,
yeah. But that shop, I know which shop he's talking about. All the money goes to a really good cause.
Yeah. So I like shopping in there because it helps the people that they support. But they do a good job. They check them and they seal them and stuff like that. But anyway, that was my pick number 2, Jimmy Buffett. And my final pick that I picked out, I have got Iron Maiden's Edward the Great.
I don't even know if I knew that was an album by Iron Maiden.
Well, typically I don't buy compilation albums at all.
Oh, okay.
But you so rarely see metal or hard rock in thrift shops. So,
that's true. I don't remember seeing anything metal or hard rock.
No, you normally find that most people who collect and buy metal albums or hard rock albums don't give them to thrift shops and keep them. So it's rare that you see this stuff. So when I saw Iron Maiden's Edward the Great, the greatest hits in the thrift shop, I had to get it. So it's got Run to the Hills, Number of the Beast, A Trooper, 2 Minutes to Midnight, Wasted Years, Can I Play with Madness? This is how many tracks is on here? It's in Roman numerals, of course. It's not in 16 classic Iron Maiden.
Yeah, subtract the 1 from the X. Took him a second there. That's amazing.
Normally I figure Roman numerals out, but I was like X1.
So with that being said, what I got is Tim chose Iron Maiden and I chose Backstreet Boys. 2 very different people there. Well, that's very fun.
I'm of the opinion with music, you like what you like. And I could listen to Buddy Holly, Jimmy Buffett, and Maiden in exactly the same sitting.
Mm-hmm. 110%. And I actually attribute my parents to that kind of mentality. My parents taught me to listen to a little bit of everything. And taught me a lot about what I know about music. All of my family, I'd say me, my twin sister, my older sister, were notorious for knowing, like Tim was talking today about music trivia, knowing every song that comes on the radio, or radio is a bad example because it's all the same 10 songs now.
Yes.
But in general, very something that I'm proud of. And I actually was hoping, because I wanted to tell this story, I was wondering, Tim, you can tell me if this is a common find in your thrift shop extravaganza. I was hoping to find like a Roy Orbison CD, but there was no luck. And the reason is my dad has an Only the Lonely tattoo. Mm-hmm. So I thought that would be cool, but I didn't find any from him. And when you said that about Buddy Holly, it made me think of Roy Orbison.
Yeah, in my various thrifting exploits, I don't think I've ever seen Roy Orbison. And in fact, you rarely see Buddy Holly, to be honest.
Yeah.
The thrift shop that I go to had 2 Buddy Holly CDs. I now have both of them.
But how often do you get the Nutty Professor soundtrack and a Shania Twain album case?
Well, I have seen Shania Twain's come on over in the thrift shop before now. It's not the one that you have, the one with the secret sauce in it, but I have seen it. But I have not seen the Nutty Professor soundtrack. I've come across The Bodyguard and Beverly Hills Cop 2, and a compilation of Rocky, but the classic Nutty Professor soundtrack. I think you hit the jackpot.
I would imagine, like, I would find the Dirty Dancing soundtrack, or like you said, The Bodyguard, or any of these things. But when I opened that up and found out what was inside, all I could do was laugh. So I was like, I should have looked at these before I walked out. And as you guys can tell, I did not go to Tim's fancy sealed thrift shop. I just went to the YMCA store.
Well, I think you I think you hit the compact disc jackpot with your haul.
I will say I studied and thought really hard because I was told before I was going to have to speak on why I made these choices. And so I sat there and I stared. I had like 3 or 4 other ones that I put back, but it was a hard choice. I will say, though, the one that I probably will, like, if I put any of these and actually listen to them, the number one that would probably be Stevie Wonder, because he's Stevie Wonder.
Sure. Songs in the Key of Life is absolutely fantastic. And all the songs that you mentioned, all the classics that's on there.
I mean, I can listen to the intro of Sir Duke a million times. I really could. And actually, did you ever see when they did the Stevie Wonder tribute with a lot of artists? I think Beyonce did the opening. It was recently, like maybe 6-7 years ago.
I think I saw that.
I absolutely loved that tribute. Beyonce did fantastic. You had Lady Gaga, and she did, I think she talks about one of the first albums she remembers putting on as a kid, like an actual album, not a CD, like moving the little record arm over, was Songs in the Key of Life. And she makes this saying she wishes she could go back, which is a reference to I Wish. Mm-hmm. But that was one of my favorite, that, and probably I love the Motown 25th anniversary. Mm-hmm. I've watched it a million times, could watch it over and over and over. One of my favorite parts of that one is when they do Money, because we were talking in last episode about whitewashing in music. Well, Money was originally done by an African-American man who was on the Motown sound. He was part of Motown. I don't know if he produced the song or if he sang it, but there's one point where there's like, you got Barry Gibb. You guys knew what I meant. Not the Gibb brothers, different thing, but Barry Gordy and all of them. And they're sitting around a piano and they do kind of like an a cappella version of Money. And he's like actually using the table for rhythm. And it is like, there's like 5 of them. And it is the coolest thing if you've never heard it. And so that was probably my favorite. Of course, everybody knows Queen's Wimbledon was the best of all time. Wimbledon, don't come for me, British people. I'm probably not saying that right.
Wembley.
Dad, Tim says it just the way you're supposed to. Those are probably some of my favorites. I can't think of anything else. Tim, do you have any favorite concerts like that or things that have happened that you liked?
I think I may have mentioned it on a previous episode. I can't remember. Nebworth 90. Was a concert that was held in England. It was a charity concert. And it was all the British artists of the day. Paul McCartney was on it, Pink Floyd were on it, Tears for Fears, Phil Collins, Genesis, Status Quo.
Now I need to go on YouTube and find it.
Cliff Richard, Shadows. And this was a very pivotal time in my life. I would just started playing guitar. I think I had an electric guitar at the time, but I hadn't really played in any bands, really. I think we used to play at school, but we didn't have anything that was tangible that was a proper band. And this concert came on TV, and I never saw Live Aid live because my parents were not really into it. So I didn't see it live when it happened, though I've seen it 100 times since.
Yeah.
For me, Nebworth 90 was my Live Aid because I saw that concert and it was life-changing because I saw all these artists that I'd only ever heard the names of, and I got to see what they look like. And I don't consider Eric Clapton to be a huge guitar influence on me. However, at Nebworth 90, he was playing and he was getting a particular sound from his guitar, which was very appealing to me. And the way that he was using vibrato on the notes, which for people who don't play guitar, it's the way that you move the string and it makes the notes sing. And I saw how he was doing that. And it was like, aha, that's how you do it.
That's cool. One of the names that my parents talked about for their children was almost Layla. So there's that.
Yeah, and I think in Nebworth 90, I think he plays Layla.
Well, there you go.
I'm sure it's probably hit YouTube at this point, but
so yeah, now I want to go find that because I'm always connoisseur of like looking up concerts like that. Like I've probably seen every Live Aid concert, even because they did it multiple years. I remember when Willie Nelson started Farm Aid. I don't know if you ever saw that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I've seen both Woodstocks, even the disaster that was the second Woodstock. And I mean, I would still say though. Oh, and they did the, what was it? It's the one where Michael Jackson, I think it's in Europe. Was it the 25th anniversary where he gets back with the Jackson 5 for like 5 minutes and then he does his own, but they all do a bunch of tribute music to him. And it's where and Shaggy even comes on. It's where I learned that It Wasn't Me by Shaggy is one of Michael Jackson's favorite songs.
I don't know if I've seen that one.
It's the one where he sings with Britney Spears, and it's a travesty.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it. I'm familiar with Motown 25, which is where he played with the Jackson 5, and then he broke off and did Billie Jean.
There's another one he does. They did a tribute to him probably early 2000s. Mm-hmm. I want to say it was in Europe, but don't quote me on it. And like Usher performs, Luther Vandross performs, a bunch of people perform for him in honor of him. And then I don't know if he performs or not, but I thought that was, maybe I'm confusing that with Motown 25 when he gets back with his brothers. But I think he does perform in that one because he performs with Britney Spears, which I explained, guys, I love Britney Spears, love her to death, but she should not be on stage singing with Michael Jackson. I'm going to stand by that. It was a disservice to her. Her voice was not strong enough to do that. And there's just certain things you don't do. Just like, I'm not going to go sing on stage with Whitney Houston anytime soon, or would have at any point in time in my life because I'm realistic. But if you go back and, Tim, when we get off this call, look up Britney Spears and Michael Jackson, and you will hear something very interesting.
Okay. Well, I will most definitely check it out. Well, I tell you what, Joy, I think it's about time that we wrap up this podcast for this week. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. And we will see you next week.
Bye.